G'day, I'm Owen Johnston. Welcome to Hop Harvest at Bushy Park Estates in Tasmania, Australia.
G'day. Today we're going to take a tour of the farm and meet some of the team behind our hops.
Our first stop is Cemetery Hill, which offers a spectacular panorama of the farm. This is where we like to bring our guests to give them a quick history lesson while they soak in the scenery. William Shoebridge successfully brought hops from England to Australia back in 1822. It was his son, Ebenezer, who established Bushy Park Estates in 1867. It stands about 55 kilometres from Hobart, bordered by the Styx and Derwent rivers. The water available, the alluvial soils, the stable microclimate, created by the proximity to the coast and protection from the mountain ranges, means it's pretty much the perfect place for growing hops. Bushy Park also happens to be on the same latitude as Nelson, the biggest growing hop region in New Zealand. You'll notice I said Bushy Park Estates, plural. We chose to retain this name as a nod to the diverse original farms that are now under our consolidated ownership. We also acknowledge the farms and their original owners in the names of some of our gardens. Ebenezer Shoebridge effectively made it possible for them to enter the hop industry by building what is still our most historically significant structure today. The Tex Kiln was named for the biblical scriptures that adorn its walls. It was operational from 1867 until, unbelievably, the early 1990s.
Bushy Park Estates has become a modern, intensive agribusiness spread over 260 hectares capable of producing more than 600 metric tonnes of hops. We've been lucky enough to invest in process and capacity improvements while the market conditions have been good, which has set us all up for a future of delicious beer. We have a team of around 30 permanent staff here at Bushy Park Estates, but that grows to around 150 over harvest when we operate 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. The day shift normally starts at 6 AM, with the night shift taking over at 6 PM.
The first step of the harvesting process is that the bottom cutter passes through, cutting the bines close to the root. It typically passes through 2 minutes before the top cutter arrives, which enables the vines to stay fresh and be transported back to the harvesting complex. The top cutter waits for the tractor to drive in ahead of it. The tractor is put into neutral and pushed along by the top cutter, cutting as close to the wire as it possibly can, enabling the vines to fall into the trailer. The tractor is then put into gear and transported back to the complex for harvesting. Believe it or not, when we're finished, we'll have harvested 1.5 million strings.
The Bushy Park Estates picking complex was built in 1992. It houses 2 downhower pickers, 12 kiln floors, a conditioning floor and a bale press.
Inside, it's basically a mirror image with 1 downhower picker and 6 kiln floors on each side of the shed. The tractors all come through this door, peel off left or right to a vacant loading bay under the tracks.
The teams drive in and they park their tractors under the hooks. They then attach their bines to the hooks, which carries them up to the picking machine.
So, how old are the picking machines?
These picking machines here are 30 years old. Despite them being 30 years old, they're still the best tool for the job. There's been no real development in picking techniques in the last 30 years, so if you buy a new machine today, they're nearly identical.
Have you made customisations to these machines over time?
We've made a couple of little tweaks here and there. The most recent addition we've made are water sprayers in the picking heads here. They help minimise the cone shatter to make sure we get as many whole cones as possible all the way through to the kiln.
So the principles haven't changed much over time?
No, this particular principle is very reliable.
And what parts do you need to replace most often?
These parts here, the picking fingers, they get snagged in the hops and we have to make regular checks to make sure they're still attached and they're not broken.
So if a picking finger breaks and it falls down into the hop stream, is that a problem?
In the picking machine we have several sets of magnets, which we check regularly through every shift.
You must get a good pick off these machines. What variables can you control?
So we can adjust the speed of the picking fingers as well as the width of the picking head to make sure that we get every single hop cone off the vine we possibly can.
And off to the cleaners?
Yeah, so once the hops are finished in the picking head here and fallen onto the grizzly mesh, they're off to the cleaning bank to separate the hop cone from the leaves and the stem.
So the hop and waste stream that's delivered to the cleaners has hop cones and leaf and stick and stem. Can you tell me about how the cleaners work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's three processes in the cleaning of the hops. The first process is the grizzly mesh underneath the picking head. That carries larger sticks and leaf off to the mulcher. The second phase of the cleaning process are the cleaners here, where the hops and the leaf fall in front of a big fan. The fan pushes the remaining leaf against a mesh where that gets carried off to the mulcher as well.
And the remaining hop cones and whatever else is left carries forward in the process?
Yeah, yep. So they head off to the last cleaning point in the process, which is the dribble belts.
And how do these work, Tom?
So once the hops and the remaining leaf have left the cleaners, they'll come onto the belts here. The remaining leaf will stick to the belts where they'll work their way all the way through to the end. The hops will roll down the belts and head on up to the kiln.
There seems to be a lot of levers here. What do these do?
So these levers here change the angles off the belt because we want to make sure there's always a clean stream of hops rolling off the back of the belt, making their way to the kiln.
So how do you measure success?
Regularly on every shift, we check for extraneous matter in our clean hop stream.
And have you got a target?
So we like to keep that under 1%. If a check comes back and it's over 1%, we know to come back to either adjust the speed of the picking heads, the speed of the fan in the cleaners, or the angles on the dribble belts.
What happens to the extraneous matter?
So once the clean hops make their way to the kiln, the extraneous matter goes outside where we compost it and spread it across the farm. So now we're in the kiln. The clean hop stream comes along the boom here where they're laid across the floor at 600 mils deep.
And Phil, when the kiln floor is full, what temperature do you set the burners at?
We set that at 60 degrees and then we dry them between 8 and 12 hours and we're trying to get it down to 8 to 12% moisture.
How do you measure that moisture? When you're getting close to the target, how do you actually find out?
Well, we wait till about 8 hours and then we get in there with the probe and we start go around on a diamond shape and we get 9 readings and we average it out and see what it is. And if it's not in spec, we just keep it going.
Come back and do it again until you're in the moisture spec.
So once you've got your final moisture reading, Phil, you write in the kiln log, which is an integral part of our quality system, which allows for product traceability.
That's right.
So the kiln floor logs through the quality system are linked to the finished pellet lot code available to the brewers. It's pretty hot and humid up here. It reminds me of a brewhouse platform, usually accompanied by some heavy metal on the stezza. Is there a soundtrack here in the kiln?
Yeah, the picking machine.
So when all 12 kiln floors are full up here, it's 40 degrees and just about 80% humidity.
What does a kiln floor weigh when it's wet?
Each floor weighs about 9 tonnes when it's green, and once it's dried down, it weighs anywhere between 1 and 2.
What do you do once you've hit your moisture spec? What happens next?
We turn the burners off and then we cool it down for 20 minutes and then we drop it down to the conditioning floor.
Watching a kiln floor drop into the conditioning room is a pretty special sight. Each kiln floor is loaded with a drag cloth which is attached to the rollers above us. Once the kiln floor is in spec, the roller turns where it's dropped down into the conditioning room floor where the hops sit for 12 hours while the moisture and heat distribute evenly through the pile.
So once the hops have been conditioned, they're elevated to the top of the hydraulic bale press and pressed into bales. Well, let's go and meet someone who knows more about pressing a bale than anyone else on site. He's been operating the bale press since 1992. So Brian, you must have pressed a few bales since 1992.
Thousands and thousands.
So finished hops on the conditioning floor are elevated up to the top of the hydraulic press here and into the chute. What happens next?
That goes automatic down the chute and they press 3-4 times.
What's your target weight?
110 kilos.
And how many bales an hour do you look for?
17 bales to 3 presses, 12 bales, 4 presses.
So once the bale is pressed, the hydraulic ram lifts up and the bale comes out right here.
That's right.
It's at this point that each bale gets a unique number. Pallets of bales are auger sampled to confirm that they are in spec. Next, the bales are transported up to the pellet plant, where they're broken down through the bale breaker and milled into a powder before being pressed through the die and into the pellets. Annalee, what does it take to press a perfect pellet?
Pressing the perfect pellet starts with having a great blend of hops so that the oils, alphas and moistures balance out. And then during the process we have to monitor the temperature and the density. So we do that once an hour, make sure that the temperature through the die doesn't exceed 55 degrees Celsius.
Do you have a density spec?
Our density specs are between 500 and 550, so we do that once an hour also. If it's below or higher than that, something's wrong.
James, the pellets have been pressed. What happens next?
So they go onto our packaging line, which we package off into various sizes for our customers. Then they go into our oxygen barrier foil, then get sealed with CO2, then packed off in the required size.
What's the shelf life on a sealed, vac-packed foil?
Given they've been treated right and in the right storage of under 5 degrees Celsius, they should last 3 years.
We store our pellets in temperature-controlled warehouses around Australia and cold ship to our distribution partners around the world. Well, that's the end of our tour. Thanks very much for taking the time to learn a bit about Bushy Park Estates and our processes.
We hope you enjoyed this year's hop harvest, and we're looking forward to seeing you all on farm again soon.